first thing we're going to do is lay out the parts, so to make sure they're all there, identify each of the parts, and one of the important parts is the safety instructions and handbook that's going to explain how to put the bar together. The important part is the safety page. Read through that carefully and understand each of the components in it. One of the parts also includes the safety instruction label that's on the vehicle for when you're actually using the vehicle. Part of that is making sure you're aware of the extra height on the vehicle, like you would be the width of the vehicle, not to use the quad bar to add extra load to the vehicle, and also don't try and do things you either wouldn't do if you didn't have a quad bar on. Now I want to talk about the final product and how it's supposed to look, which is important to actually know what our product's going to look like at the end. We need it vertically this way and that way, so the suspension can move down, up and down properly. And we need it about sort of the height of the average rider's eye height. So when it's all finished, this is how it's supposed to look, nice and vertical and straight up and down. Okay, now I want to try and explain to you about how to get the bar nice and vertical. We're going to use that through these adjustment holes down the bottom of the quad bar, and the bottom bracket is normally supposed to be in this direction. In other words, the bow is in towards the front of the vehicle like that. It can be put on that way, but that's only if the tow bar's tucked in underneath the vehicle and you need that extra distance to bring it out. Also, if you have something fouling the bottom bracket in up underneath here, you may need to put it in this direction. So we're going to start off with having it this direction. We're going to use our bottom tube that's going to go over the mechanism and come up, and then we need to use our upright, and we're going to get a bit of an idea on which holes we need to do to fit the bar. While we've got it together, I also want to talk about the tension we're going to put on the bolts. It's important that we get the right tension on each of the bolts. On these tube type fittings, all we need to do here is to do up the bolt until it becomes, these surfaces all touch each other, and then once we've done that, we're going to do it 1/2 turn more, and that's all we need. We don't need to be crushing these tubes. So for these bolts, and then the optional extra of the fold down those bolts there, and these tube bolts down here, and the bottom bracket tubes down here. The bolts that we do have to do up tight are the 6mm bolts here, and they just need to be done up as you would normally do with a hand spanner until they're nicely tight. The one down the bottom, the 3/4 bolt, we need to do that up very tight with a hand spanner. We also need to do up the U-bolts on the back here. For this, we need to be able to do it up until this plate here just starts to bend, and we need to keep on doing it until we get a slight bend in this tubing, or this starts to bend this tubing here. It must be very tight so that doesn't pivot on that tube there. This must also be flat when we install it, so it allows the suspension to move fully up and down. And once we've got that all set up, we need to then weight the vehicle so it moves through its full suspension and make sure that this doesn't jam anywhere. So we need to pick it up and push it all the way down and make sure it moves for its full suspension movement to make sure it works properly. Okay, we're going to put together the top and bottom brackets. Simple as popping the bush into the plate there, putting the chain ring on, and inserting the bolts and doing up the nuts. With the bottom bracket, it's slightly more complicated. We're going to put the bottom bracket in its preferred position with the front of the quad that way, the rear of the quad this way, and insert the black bushes into there. Slide it over the bottom bracket, insert the bolt like that, and do up our nuts. Again, like the tube connections, we'll do this just until these washers start to firm up, and then we're going to give it 1/2 turn more, so it still moves, but it's still quite firm there. Okay, we've now finished our top mount and our bottom mount. Well, that's bolted to the tow bar. We have this mounted to the top rack. We can now fit our tubes. We roughly know where we're going to put them as far as the hole adjustment is. So we pop our tubes up. And once we've got our uprights vertical, we can then insert our bolts either side. Then we're going to do up these tubes until the surfaces touch, and then again another half turn more, and that's all we need. If the tow bar is fairly well out here, sometimes you may need these holes further down in the tube, like down here. This tube won't slide all the way up to utilise those holes, so you'll need to cut off the tube so it'll slide up further into the tube and line up these holes here. Finally, we're going to put the top hoop on, which slides over our tubes like that, and the spacer bar goes between them, and then put the bolts in, and then pop the nuts on, and do them up as before until the surfaces come together, and then another half turn more. All right, now we get our top mount plates nice and adjusted, so it moves through its full suspension again, from the top of the suspension down to the bottom of the suspension. Once we've got it correctly adjusted, we can then tighten up our U-bolts on either side until they're quite tight and this plate begins to get a little bit of a bow in it, or this tube starts to get a little bit of a bend in it. Finally, we're going to check the adjustment, the height adjustment of it. It should be around about the eye level of the average rider. If it needs to come down, we have some pilot holes here. You can drill these out with a 8mm or 5/16 drill bit and drop the whole mechanism down to that level there. Finally, we can pop the padding on, which means just a matter of trying to get the wedge over the top and pulling it over the top till it clicks on, making sure it's nice and straight, and we're right to go.